See if he's able to jump on the next minute, and then we can get started.
Okay.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please note the changes to the agenda under consent agenda letter D. Are there any other changes? Hearing none, we'll move on to our presentation. Jeremy, do you want to introduce our presenters today?
Sure. We have Sandy Sherwood, who is our district superintendent, and then Steve Coop, who will be working with her as the business manager administrator over at BOCES.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. I am going to share my screen if I can have permission to share.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So Jeremy, does or Marcia, does the board have the budget packet that was sent out?
Yes, it was.
Yes,
It's
we do.
part of. It's linked to the agenda.
Okay, great. So I'll be presenting all the different pieces that are in that packet, and I'll reference those page numbers in case you have it in front of you. So thank you very much for welcoming us tonight. I realize the virtual setting is a little stranger than when we come in person and can have a little more robust dialogue. But if there are questions that come up while I'm doing the presentation, please speak up so that we can address them as we go through it. The budget, as you know, each board votes on the administrative budget. We're also going to be presenting the capital budget because those are really the only two pieces that we can predict at this point. All the program budgets really come down to what the different districts ask for. And those requests aren't even fully in yet. So this will be the administrative budget and the capital budget. And Steve, just jump in if I miss anything, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see. How do I do this? I guess I got to do this way. Sorry. Tricks of presenting correctly. Did the slide change for everyone? Okay. So the administrative budget, BOCES budget, is quite different from the school district's budget. There's basically five main parts and then a big cost driver. So we're going to look at each of these, starting with Board of Education, then the district superintendent, central administration, business administration, transfer charges, and then one of the big cost drivers for our admin budget is the post-retirement health costs. But that is actually something that benefits you because then you end up driving BOCES aid on those costs. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But overall, if you were just looking at the administrative component, it would be a 3.33% increase budget year to budget year. Later, you'll see that when we factor in the capital budget, it's actually just over a 1% increase with the two combined. So going on to Board of Education. So Board of Education budget, it doesn't have a lot of changes in it. Non-instructional, as you may recall, 2 years ago, we actually, so in this current budget year, we brought in the costs of the district clerk that had not been assigned to the Board of Education. So a portion of that salary is in there, and then a portion of those benefits, as well as the claims auditor that the Board of Education, there's two, a claims auditor and a deputy claims auditor. Those stipends are also there in non-instructional salary. And then, of course, the benefits associated with those positions are part of the increases. Otherwise, the big expense here is our labor relations and our audit, but those are not going up much at all, just a kind of typical expectation of an increase year over year. So no big changes in Board of Education budget. Any questions on this one? Okay. The district superintendent budget is exactly what it sounds like. It's me, my secretary, and then the costs related with that office. I will point out I'm sorry, I should have pointed out in the last picture, the first picture had Mr. Rich and I actually doing the signing of the paperwork for the Remington building, but there's another picture later that also focuses on that. This picture is actually from the State Education Department building. If you ever get to tour it in Albany, it's pretty amazing. There are some murals that are really worth spending some time looking at. So anyways, that's what this is. District superintendent, the one thing that has jumped out at most people who review this budget is it would appear that I'm getting a pay cut for next year. That's not actually what's happening. As some of you may recall from previous presentations, we do the district superintendent evaluation. We do it in November and December so that the board can project what they will do as any kind of increase in July so that it's actually accurate, reflected in the budget. So last November and December, they budgeted a very generous raise, but then COVID hit. And so I asked them not to give me that raise and to give me a lower raise, which they did. And then I asked them to hold that flat for this year. So the number that you're seeing proposed for 21-22 is actually exactly the same as what I'm receiving in 20 and 21. But I do want to point out, when you look at the TRS, the teacher retirement system, while that does go up every year, there is some additional money in there because the Board of Education agreed to freeze my salary, but they wanted to put at least some money towards a 403B, which is not typically part of my contract. So there is a little give there. And again, that's only what they're talking about now. That is subject to change because nothing goes into effect till July. So otherwise, this budget is just the benefit changes commensurate with any like my secretarial support. She gets increase in her salary and therefore her benefits are going up. My benefits should be fairly flat except for TRS because that goes up every year whether we get a raise or not. Any questions on this budget? Also, just a reminder, the district superintendent salary, that's only the BOCES share. The State Education Department, this would be on pages 4 and 5 in your budget books. The State Education Department directly pays me $43,499 every year. That's their share of the district superintendent. That's not reflected here. Okay, moving on to central administration. This picture actually shows me giving Mr. Rich a very large dollar for a very nice building. Our VisCom kids, our visual communications kids actually developed a dollar with a picture of Remington in the middle. There is, if you notice, there is a small dollar, a real dollar bill slightly behind that. So he did get cash money for that building. So hopefully that got recorded correctly. So otherwise, what behind us is the principal of Pathways, who of course is very happy to have this building and have a more permanent home for our alternate education kids. And then Mary Klein, who basically is the director of everything except K-12. So she does preschool, migrant, adult ed, LPN, all the wraparound programs. That's Mary. And she's also very happy to have a home there in Remington in one end of the building. So that was quite a celebration. We were very happy about that. Here in central administration, there aren't a lot of changes. Every year, the trick in the BOCES budget is we have to look at every position and determine exactly what programs they're serving and then allocate pieces of people into the different programs. So that's why these fluctuate a little bit. The biggest change, though, really is in the general liability insurance, about halfway down. This would be page 6 of your booklet. The general liability insurance is a bit puzzling when we were looking at it, because if you look at the actual expenses from 1920, they were just under 32,000, yet this year we budgeted 25. So 32 is actually more accurate And now we need to budget for insuring Remington. So the additional $10,000 is actually to insure the Remington building. Otherwise, this one is fairly flat. Consultants include things like our legal services, our Cap Region BOCES cross contract for public relations and communications, and then all of the miscellaneous postage and copier costs and things like that. Any questions on central administration? Okay. I'll go on to business administration, which is page 7 of your booklet. The biggest change here, as Jeremy already introduced Steve Coop. He's our new business manager. Jody Rodriguez retired as the assistant superintendent for business. So while an assistant superintendent came out and a business manager came in, as part of this, we also needed to shift our entire administrative team. So part of what's in the business administration now is a portion of Jim Piccola's salary. He's the assistant superintendent for administrative services. So he's now got responsibility for overseeing the business office, the central business office, the facilities, safety office, and technology. So those are all part of him. So for the administrative budget purposes, he needed to have a piece of him allocated here in the business office where he previously wasn't assigned. No portion of his salary was here. The good news from a program perspective is that will take a big piece of his salary out of the program budget, which will help to adjust tuitions down for different programs. So it's always a balancing act with BOCES. If they're not in one budget, then they have to be in another, because we don't get any state aid or anything like that to cover any of these. Otherwise, I think this one was pretty flat. Contractual, we do have some increases in contractual. That's mostly due to the costs of WinCap, which is the only software program that does BOCES aid correctly. So, and we also have quite a few new staff in our business office. So there are some additional costs this year going towards training, and that would all be in contractual. Otherwise, I think the rest is just commensurate with salary increases. Any question on the business office? Steve, did I miss anything here?
No, you hit all the key points.
Okay. I guess I should probably just point out that interest expense. That's the money we budget every year in case we need to borrow in the summer. That would cover any borrowing costs. But every year it pretty much gets zeroed out because we don't have any borrowing costs. This year, it's probably going to get zeroed out as an interest expense, but we have, for those of you who were on the board last year, we're planning, we had planned to use, and we did use part of that 18,000 to cover the costs of the vote for the Remington building, because that had to come out of somewhere. So that was what we used, but it will still probably be zeroed out because it's still not an interest expense. So it'll be a transfer. Okay, moving on to page 8 of your budget. This is kind of the weird part of BOCES, although I've already mentioned it a little bit. Transfer charges. This is where we really have to look at every expense and allocate it appropriately. So I'm going to come back to transfer for reserves in a minute, but this is where we have to say what is the administrative office's share of the telephone costs, the computer costs. Staff development is actually the school board institute cost. That's what this is. The transfer. So the biggest change to this budget is we are not transferring any money into the TRS reserve. 2 years ago, when they first allowed the TRS reserve, we actually had some money sitting left over from a federal fund, and it was very limited what it could be used for. So when the TRS when in April, the government approved the TRS reserve, our auditor said that is an appropriate use of that leftover government fund. So we put part of it towards it in 1920. We put the rest of that government money will be going in this current school year, and then that expends that. And we're not allocating any additional money into the TRS reserve. So that's the big change there, was that money had to be expended out of this part of the budget. Any questions on this?
Sandy, that's why it's 0 over in 21, 22.
For transfer for reserves, yes, we're not until we've used that government surplus, and then we're not at, this is not the year for us to try to add to our reserves as far as TRS goes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so the big part of the admin budget is the post-retirement health costs. And this is something that goes back when I first became the DS in 1718. I worked with the superintendents to find out, do you want us to move more of the post-retirement costs into the admin budget? And the answer was yes, because it actually drives a better aid percentage for the school districts than to have it out in the programs. So every year we've been slowly building it up. As you can see, what we're proposing for next year, that amount would actually bring 63.16% of the whole administrative cost is post-retirement costs. Another way of looking at this, though, is with this proposal, once we have this money allocated into the admin budget, 71.3% of all of our post-retirement costs will be in this budget. So we are really making some nice progress towards getting the post-retirement costs more into this budget. And just like with your budgets, we still have to keep a balance between different parts of the budget. So we can't just put all the post-retirement costs in any given year, because it would throw the whole balance off. So we're just slowly creeping up, but we are up to 71% with this proposed budget. So hopefully we'll just keep inching up towards, I think ideal would be about probably 95%. Any questions on this? Okay. So page 9 of your budget booklet actually reviews the RWADAs. These are, if you look at them at a quick glance, you kind of see the enrollment outline for our districts, but you've got to remember that a lot of the BOCES costs are based on our WADA, and that's a weighted average daily attendance. And what's weighted is different students with different needs are weighted differently. So a student with disabilities is weighted differently from a student who's an English language learner, from a student who might be economically disadvantaged, all of those things. So these numbers come directly from the state, from what every school district submits to the state as their data. And then we are told what the RWADAs are for our school districts. Was there a question? Okay. So then on page 12 of your booklet is the actual kind of the distribution of looking at the administrative budget and the capital charges. Because again, like I said at the beginning, these are really the only two parts of the budget that we can predict, because the rest are all programmed based on what people ask for. And those needs, not only do we not have all of the requests in for next year, but they change depending on families that might move in that have needs that need to be met at BOCES as opposed to in your district. So there's a lot of variables in the program budget. But looking at the administrative and the capital budget, you can see, oh, I'm sorry, in the, for our WADA, I should have pointed out to you, that last year, if you think of our WADA as your slice of the BOCES pie, last year you had 23.7% of the BOCES was Central Valley from an RWADA perspective. This year you're up a little bit, you're up to 23.84%. So you have a slight increase in your RWADA, and that may be due to increased student needs, or it may be that other districts had enrollment outflux, which then makes your pie a little bit bigger. So it's all kinds of variables that go into our WADA. So looking at your administrative and your capital charges, you can kind of look across and see the overall change for Central Valley between those two budgets is a 1.82%. So a slight increase. When we look for all 10 districts, the balance between administrative and capital is an overall increase of 1.35%. Any questions on our WADA and capital budget? Okay. So any questions on the general BOCES budget? So April 1st, we do have our annual meeting. Of course, no dinner this year because we haven't figured out, I guess we could use DoorDash or something, but we're really looking forward to when the kids can prepare the meal for us as they have in the past, and certainly hope that in 2022, we can have the boards come in as we have before and actually have the culinary students prepare and serve a meal and have student performance and everything else. This year, because it is going to be so different, it is scheduled for April 1st. And no, that's not a joke. It actually is April 1st. We are asking every board to have at least one representative on the Zoom meeting. So that, because there are 2 votes that occur on that night. One is to accept the minutes from the previous annual meeting, and the other is to adjourn. So I want to make sure we do have quorum so we can get those 2 action items done. But otherwise, we're really looking at this meeting this year completely differently, because it's really not going to be about BOCES and what BOCES does. It's really going to be a celebration of what this region has accomplished in the past year. By the time we get to that annual meeting, we will have been just over 1 year dealing with the pandemic head on. So we're really focusing on all the kids and all the teachers. Student performance, I'm collecting artwork from all the different districts and just putting it into a presentation that'll play for about 10 minutes before the meeting. And then we'll play it again for about 10 minutes after the meeting, just showing some incredible artwork that the kids have done in the last year. My discussion will really be on perseverance and how we've all worked together this past year. And I've asked all the district superintendents to send me pictures of staff during the pandemic, and not just teaching staff, because none of us would be able to do our jobs if it weren't for our bus drivers and our clerical and our maintenance and our food service and all the other people. And quite honestly, our parents who have made this whole thing work in a really difficult situation. And then this year also, our Community Partner Award is going to the Herkimer County Public Health Department, because they have been tremendous partners with us, coming in and meeting with the superintendents, talking with us on weekends and at night, especially at the peak of the quarantines, trying to work with us to protect as many people in our community as possible from spread. So that is who we're going to be honoring as our Community Partner Award. And then the actual vote on the administrative budget is on Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. And the 3 board seats that are up this year are Frankfurt Schuyler, Little Falls, and Richfield Springs. They're all up for regular 3-year terms. So, and I believe we may have already received each of those boards' nominations. So I do think every seat is being recommended. I believe all 3 members that are currently on the BOCES board are being recommended, I believe. But so that'll be before you on April 21st. So other than that, I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you for the time tonight, but also thank you for the great work that's been going on around the region. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you as well. It's great to be.
All right, thank you. And so now we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. I was going to address what she just addressed in my report. The only piece I want to add is that, Jane, I don't know if Sandy had asked you, but to be the board representative for that virtual meeting on April 1st.
Yes.
Are you okay with that?
Yep, no problem.
All right, perfect. That was the only other thing that I had in that section, and Sandy did a better job than I would have done in terms of covering the virtual meetings. The next thing I want to discuss is the public health emergency plan, or what we call the pandemic plan. Right now, it is currently on our website. It has to be on our website for 30 days for public comment. This was something that was implemented as a result of, let's say, the pandemic that we are in. It's not the same plan as our reopening plan, but basically when the pandemic happened, none of us had a pandemic plan. And what they basically wanted us to do was to create a template. They have a template. We implanted what needs to go in it, and any other future pandemics, we basically have some sort of roadmap to go by. Obviously, what we created for our current pandemic would be used heavily in any future pandemics, but we certainly had to designate certain things within it. It's on the website and open for public comment. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. We as a board will adopt that plan in April, and that basically, that timeline was put out from the state. And so we have the plan now. We had to kind of work backwards from April to make sure that we had all of the public comment period done and over with. We adjusted the draft if we needed to, and then as a board, we will adopt it in April. Arts, our education. This is something that came through where I just wanted to publicly talk about the importance and the significance of the arts with our kids, and make sure that we're all on the same page there, where I really feel like our arts department in this situation, one of the departments that really is done with hands-on and kids having to be with their instructors. I said from the beginning, all of our kids, I think, are certainly in a better position when they're with their teachers, but with the arts, when you're kind of trying to sing and play instruments and do a play, it's really hard to do it virtually. And Mark Bunce and the rest of the music department has done a phenomenal job of creating virtual concerts and virtual opportunities for our kids. That's what they like to do and express themselves. And I just feel like we need to make sure that we understand, especially during this pandemic, that the arts have been something that we've turned to help us through this pandemic. And we weren't sure how it was going to work. And they've done a great job of creating awesome opportunities for our kids. And so just want to make sure we're all on the same page there, that I'll always be a fighter for the arts. I believe in them, and was raised in my own family to appreciate the arts. So the next thing is high-risk sports. As all are aware by now, the governor came out and said that we would be able to do high-risk sports. The dots don't necessarily match up in terms of some of the other things that we are trying to do. For example, there's a lot of talk this week on the federal level as well as the state level with, the CDC came out with the 6 foot to 3 foot separations in terms of social distance. Our state has to basically accept that, and then our local Department of Health would have to accept it next. It certainly makes sense if we're going to have kids, playing high-risk sports and playing defense or wrestling. Why then can't I have more students on a bus sitting next to each other to get them here to get into school? And I want to publicly say that we are well aware of the fact, that superintendents were trying to get kids back to school, while also understanding that sports and the arts are important parts of kids' lives too. So this is this big thing that's a lot of things have to change. And when you're changing executive orders and things like that, it's a long process. And so I don't want to throw darts at it, but it's getting there. It's getting there. And right now there's a lot of inconsistencies. I think it's obvious when we see and talk about the inconsistencies, but they're trying to clean that up. And obviously the quicker they clean that up, it allows us as a school district to do more and more for our community and for our kids. So, high-risk sports for us is going to start on Monday, and it's going to start in this region. One of the things that will happen for Central Valley is, basketball, girls and boys, as well as competitive cheer is going to, girls and boys basketball is going to start on Monday. The big thing with that is we were able to leave the TVL for this season, which is allowing us to play schools just in our area so that we're kind of not traveling all over the place, and we're staying put right here in Herkimer County. Later on, other seasons will rejoin. We're the only school district out of the 10 component districts that plays in the TVL. And so the TVL allowed us to branch away for this season, and then eventually we'll get back in the springtime back into the TVL. We had to create a plan for the high-risk sports. It had to be adopted by not only the board, but also Department of Health and our nurse practitioners all had to approve it. It's all been approved. So what we have in place is able to be put into action when we start. One of the big pieces with the sports during the winter here is this was a league decision that they're not going to have any spectators, and that's a tough one. And one of the things that we did to be proactive to that is we put cameras in our gym, and we've been working on that for a long time, and we have them up and functional. So we'll be able to live stream those games at the very least. So you'll be able to, parents will be able to sit home, log in, and basically our big gym will be 100%. All the competitions will come out of the big gym so that parents can see that. One of the other things that's being discussed is senior nights, obviously, in figuring out how to allow the senior parents to be able to come in for a senior night at least, so they can at least have that experience with their child. And so those things are being worked out right now, and that's a little bit on the high-risk sports. I sent something out yesterday or the day before to the teachers. The federal government came through and said basically that there was not going to be a waiver for at least the 3 through 8 testing, and that 3 through 8 testing was going to have to still continue. Obviously, the issues with that are a lot, but at the very least, they're not going to count the same way, but the state or the federal government's looking at it as it gives feedback to parents in terms of how their child has done or has not done. We all know that this year is going to be different than any other year in terms of we're doing the best we can with instructing our kids. I've also said it's subpar for anything less than these kids being in person, while also respecting the current situation and parents who have chosen to have their children stay home virtually. And it's nothing to do with our teachers not working hard or trying to do their best with the instruction. They certainly have done amazing work with what I've asked them to do with the instructional model. But at the very least, the Regents exams are a New York State thing. And so that's different than the federal piece. And all I'm going to say to this is this: New York State is still going to fight against it. But at this point, 3 through 8 tests will still occur. Any child who is virtual, obviously, first question is, are they going to have to come in and take the tests? No, there's not going to be any forced job on that. But there's still a lot of questions with this. I just want the board to be aware that this is going to be a battle right now with the state and with the, let's say, the unions going after, like, how are we going to do this with all of the inequities that have occurred throughout the course of the year. But we're going to let that one kind of marinate a little bit and see where that goes. But there's a lot of lobbying that's going to go on there still, in my opinion. COVID update right now, coming back after break, we're in a good situation as we speak right now. And in terms of vaccinations, we have about 65% of our teachers anyway that have either been fully vaccinated or have at least had one shot. On Friday, we're going to, through public health, I got a notice today that we have 33 slots on Friday. So tomorrow, the admin team and the principals will work on filling those 33 slots with anyone who wants to be vaccinated over at Department of Health in Herkimer. And so that's a good thing for those who want to be vaccinated. And then finally, return to 912 students. This is the next big thing that I wanted to talk about publicly. We're going to bring back our 912 students March 15th. And it's going to be a hybrid model. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be something that's better than nothing. We will certainly have some issues with it. One of the other pieces we're going to try to do, and all of the communication about this to the community will come out tomorrow, but I wanted to at least talk to the board tonight about it. The teachers are aware of this. All of the employees are aware of this. I sent it out yesterday, and I sent it out to you guys as well, but wanted to talk more in depth about it. On the 15th, what we also want to do is, because it's going to be new for the busing for the 912, that's going to be rocky at best. I mean, we're going to certainly plan it and figure it out, but it's going to take us a couple days like anything to get that set. On that particular day, we want to do have our elementary be a synchronous virtual though on that day, so that we can at least get through that first day of bringing back our 9-12 with the middle school students. And then on Tuesday, we would try to do it for everybody, K-12, in bringing in who we're busing. I want to be clear that it's not going to be smooth, but just because it's not going to be smooth doesn't mean that we're not going to give it a shot. And so we're going to give it a shot, and we're going to work through those growing pains. And the only thing I will say is that the community has been tremendous. The teachers have been tremendous. And I don't see it being anything less as we try to do this next phase in for what we're trying to do. So we'll do the best we can. I want to speak a little bit here on the 9-12 teachers who will be transitioning as well. Our obviously pre-K through 8th grade teachers have been doing this for some time now. Its next step is for our 9-12. It's been positive where they're well aware of this coming. We've been talking about it for a long time, and we'll do the very best that we can. We've had protocols in place to make it safe. We certainly wouldn't do it if we didn't think it was going to be safe. But the one thing, we have about 60% of the kids that want to come back, 9-12. That'll approximately be, let's say, 250 kids in the building each day. As you know, this is a big complex. We'll be able to spread those kids out and be safe doing it. So it'll be a transition for our high school teachers, but like all of our teachers, they've been doing awesome, and I can't say enough. And I will be the first to say that I put them in a difficult position this whole school year with not only teaching in person to kids, but virtually teaching through a computer at the same time. They had every right to be upset with me with that. But I'm hoping that we can look back on what we've been able to accomplish and what they have been able to accomplish 5 years from now and say, we've done a tremendous job of doing the very best we could with teaching our kids in a situation that has not been ideal. And so I need to give the administrative team and the teachers and the custodians who are cleaning and doing all of that, our bus drivers who are keeping track of where to go, our food service people who are still making meals for all of these kids, our secretaries and bus garages who get calls every day on this, the Board of Education, all of you who get calls on this every day. This is not easy for anybody. And then also the parents who, there's times where I'm like, oh my God, we've got to shut down tomorrow. And you've been very supportive of that. And we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without that support. And so being able to make those transitions has not been easy. And again, I just appreciate that and appreciate the support that you've given the district to all of you looking at me and everyone in this school district that has done a tremendous job with that. So thank you to all. And again, we're doing the best we can and trying to do the best we can. And I know all of you are as well. So I appreciate it. So that's what I have. Next, I don't have any administrative reports, but at our next board meeting, I'm going to have administrative reports where we will be talking about the goals of the board goals and how they're tied to our DSIP and our set plans. And Kathy Carney will be leading that along with the other administrators, basically coming into that equation and just giving us an update on how we're doing with all of that. And so a lot of work has been done, and it's time to kind of update and report that. So that'll happen. One of those, I said that I want them to come in about 4 times a year. That's going to be one of those meetings where the admin comes in and discusses with the board. So that's all I have. We can move on to Jim, unless there's any questions.
Jeremy, will the hybrid model for 9-12 look similar to what you're doing for 7-8?
yes and no. Yes, in the fact that the kids will be here 2 days a week. So if I'm in one cohort, actually, Mr. Keeler's here. I'm going to have Mr. Keeler explain it because he'll do a better job than I can.
Everybody. So yes, the model is going to be somewhat similar with a few tweaks. In fact, that we sent the survey out where parents indicated whether they wanted their child to return in the hybrid model or remain virtual for the remainder of the year. Based on all of that information, we have had to create 4 different groups. So we have a blue group, which will be our students that will be coming in on Mondays and Tuesdays. We have a yellow group, which is our students who will be coming in on Thursdays and Fridays. We also have a white group, which is our students who are going to be 100% virtual. Based on certain guidelines with the state and recommendations from the state, we also have a green group, which is students who will be attending school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday will be an all virtual day where our teachers will be teaching synchronously all day, similar to the model that our students have been in all day. So on Wednesdays, teachers will be in front of all the kids virtually like we are today. Those students that are coming of state guidelines where they're English language learners, certain special education needs that need to be met, as well as I have targeted at-risk seniors who are at risk of not graduating. And we've had them coming in for 4 days a week as well to try to get them the credits they need to graduate on time. The survey was completed, I want to say, within the last few weeks. And we've been working with families the last couple of days, just modifying and making sure that everything's up to par and where we need to be. Letters are going to be mailed home by the end of the week. So parents will receive a letter indicating the days of the week that their child will be attending. The letters will also include a packet that will show the procedures and protocols for the students to follow when they're in person. It'll also have a visual 1-page document that shows the 4 different groupings we have, as well as a new schedule for students that'll now include different study halls if they have free time in their schedule. So the study halls will now appear. Students can actually see the schedule, not the schedule, but see the days that they're coming. If parents wanted to have the child log on, they could see the days of the week ahead of time now. But the letters are being completed and will be mailed out by the end of this week. We also had to make sure that when we put the kids in certain groups, we wanted to make sure that family members were consistent with their siblings at Jarvis, so that parents didn't have to worry about what day of the week certain kids are going. A whole household should report it on the same day. We also had to take into account that our BOCE students who are in person for 2 full days, they're with us on the opposite 2 days in person. So there are little nuances that we tweak to make work for our.
Rich, you hit your mute button
At what point did I hit that?
about 10 seconds ago.
So I was just simply saying with the BOCES piece, making sure that, that it lines up where the BOCES students who are in person 2 days a week, full day at BOCES have the opportunity to still be with us for 2 full days. But we had to also align different families to make sure that kids in Jarvis are aligned with the similar days with high school siblings, because that helps with transportation, because if you're in the same household, now you can put 2 kids to a seat, but otherwise it's 1 student.
Thank you. So one of the things. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I'm good.
Okay. One of the things I want to comment on is the tremendous amount of planning that took place to line up families, to make sure that our BOCE students were able to also attend on the other 2 days, and then also align them with their families. That the guidance counselors and the principals did a tremendous job of putting all of that together. And so that hopefully will not only help out us with busing and be able to get more kids on the bus because they can sit together, but it's really about helping families out at home where it's not so confusing that kids are going left and right, as well as if there's older kids, they can still watch potentially younger kids if they're home. So everyone's at school and the family at the same time. So I appreciate that extra effort that it took to do that, but in the end, we feel like it was the right thing to do.
Jeremy,
Yes,
question about lunch periods. This is a full day of school, correct? They're not going to be allowed to go in the cafeteria, correct? Are they going to be doing lunches in the classroom similar to Jarvis, or?
so yes and no again, but I'll let Mr. Keeler answer that question.
So part of the delays with the high school too is our scheduling and our requirements are significantly different from the middle school. It's a lot easier to cohort middle school students to where our high school students have such variety of scheduling options. We're not able to cohort. So kids will be moving period to period. You know, and I've talked to other local high schools and other high schools within New York State, on our state forums on how that work, and we put procedures in place that mirror what they've been doing all year that have made it work. So our students will transition period to period into classrooms. They will be eating lunch in the cafeteria because we're not able to cohort, we're not able to have them remain in a classroom to do that. So we have taken all of the round tables out that we have in our cafeteria traditionally. The benefit of the building projects is we have a beautiful large cafeteria. So I'm able to put enough desks and chairs spread out, social distance 6 feet apart in that cafeteria to accommodate the maximum number of students that we'll have at any given time for one lunch period, which currently sits around 140 kids. They'll come in, they'll sit down, lunch will be served to them at their table, you know, and it's a shortened period anyway this year. They're 35 minutes. We won't have the luxury of kids being able to go in the gym, play basketball, and kind of, you know, release that way that they traditionally would for lunch. But we will be able to bring the grade levels into the cafeteria to eat lunch, be served, and have everything clean for the next group and make that work.
Keeler, can you please talk about how some kids will be able to leave as well if their schedule has been front loaded? They don't necessarily have to stay the rest of the day.
Yeah, so due to the circumstances this year with scheduling, our 11th grade students, so 9th and 10th grade students are locked into a full day. They have a full schedule. So the day will look pretty normal for them. For our students who are in 11th grade that attend BOCES, they go to BOCES full time on Mondays and Tuesdays. But on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they only have a half day schedule with us because traditionally they're only with us half day. They're at BOCES half day. You know, the negative of that is they miss 40% of their classes with us as a result of that. So the question is, with those students coming back, would they want to come back, be with us full day and sit in a half day of study hall? So I will be releasing our juniors when their classes are complete, so they do not have to sit in study hall for half a day. So when their classes are done, they will be released and be able to go home. Similarly, our seniors this year, we gave our seniors the option to reduce their caseload and take courses that were required to graduate, as well as to take any elective that they want. It was their choice. So we do have some seniors with some very light schedules. Similarly, we have the same situation with our BOCES students, where on the days they're not at BOCES, they have a half-day schedule. So with our seniors, I'm gonna have an open campus as well, where they can come in, get their temperature checked, do the screening, report to their classes, leave, and then in some cases, they come back at the end of the day for a couple of classes. We'll re-screen them as they come back in the building, allow them to go to their classes in person, and then leave when they're complete. I just don't want a kid to feel like they're wasting their time by coming and sitting in study halls for half the day. I want them to take advantage of being in front of teachers as much as they can. You know, so trying to weigh both sides of that for both the educational purpose and the kids' side of it. So I think it'll work out, and that's what we're trying to make happen for the kids in the process.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Jeremy? All right, Jim.
Good to see everybody. I have sent the board the January financials along with the debt service report showing, again, we're netting roughly $650,000 because of the project and the money we were able to contribute to the project. There's the possibility we have a 100K project in the works right now for the gym floor and the flooring in the auditorium. If that work can be completed before July 1, then that would actually add about another $98,000 to that. So it'd be roughly $740,000 on the plus side for our building aid next year versus our debt service, which is, that was the plan from the start with our incentive aid. And we followed through with it, with the contribution of a little over $12 million to that project. And that kind of leads me into the second part of my report that I sent to you, talking about the possibility of trying to get our voters to approve a $4 million capital reserve for the next project, which is mainly focused at the 2000 edition of our high school. We couldn't touch those roofs with this last big project, even though we had talked about it, but they weren't out of warranty yet. There was still, they were in a 20-year situation on those roofs. But there are issues with them. You can see that as you walk through that area, that you see spots in the ceilings and different, stains on the floors from different leaks that we've had through the years. So those roofs are going to need to be done within the next 2 to 3 years. We're working with King & King and probably Campus again to try to design a project that's going to take care of some of that need, along with some of the items that got missed in this last project, just because of the size and the scope of the last one. There were some issues that didn't get addressed, be it some parking lot issues at Fisher, the fire alarm system at Fisher Elementary. It's not that outdated, but it's not comparable to the fire alarm systems in the other 3 buildings. So there's some items out there, along with our locker rooms in our main gym area. Those are pretty outdated now, and they need some attention, in that a lot of the showers aren't working properly and things like that. So there's probably I'll say $5 to $8 million project that should occur in sometime between let's say July 2022 and January of probably 24, somewhere in that time zone. We got to address those issues. And with that, if we were to put a $4 million reserve in place, we would fund a good portion of that and then push that money down the road for the next 15 years in building aid. And 95% of that money would flow back to us. And that's been the plan from the start, with some of this extra incentive aid from the state when we merged years ago.
Jim, can I just put that in really simple terms? Any time that we spend money, if we can get aid back on that money, it's a far superior way to do it versus just a one-time buy of spending money and then not getting any aid on it. So if we spend that $4 million and are able to get aid on it and get 98% back on it over the course of 15 years, over the course of that 15 years, we basically almost get that building project for free. And so, like any house or anything that we own, there's constant maintenance. So the other part of this is, we just did a big building project, and people will say, well, why are we doing another one? It's because we have 4 buildings and we constantly have to maintain them in order for them to look nice. And there's ways to do it where it doesn't cost the taxpayer a tremendous amount of money, because we're getting the aid back. So just want to make sure that you understand the strategy, and that's really simplified, but the strategy of it, I think you can get the gist of what I just said.
Jeremy, can I ask a question in regards to that?
Yes.
So with all these capital projects, are there any type of projects that can upgrade our facilities, like our scoreboards and things that are outdated, dugouts, those type of things? Are those ever put in any type of projects?
We try really hard to get them in a project. The hard part is getting aid on some of those things. And so every school district wants to try to do that, but the aid comes from, let's say, the educational pieces, or let's say the the infrastructure pieces or the technology pieces. And there are ways, though, that the architects figure out creative ways, I'll call it, to maybe sometimes slip some of those things in. So trust me when I say that we're trying to, at any point, if we can get any of those things slid in an appropriate manner, we will do so. You know, they all get audited, the state all looks at it, and what we don't want to do is say, yeah, we have money to do this, and then the state takes it away because it's not eligible to be aided. So we want to be very careful with that. But at the same time, we are constantly trying to work on, you know, upgrading those things for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You know, that's about all I had to share with the board tonight. And again, Jeremy, you know, you can't take the words out of my mouth any better than just saying many of the items that we look at are expense-driven aids. You know, so if we're looking at spending, especially large dollars, we want to try to find areas where we can spend that money where we're going to drive aid.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, moving on to board discussion.
I had a question about the workout facility weight room. Are we going to be opening that up along with sports?
So now that we are able to do the opening of high-risk sports, that's next on opening that up and trying to do it as safely as we possibly can. But obviously, we want our athletes to be able to use that facility. And then what comes along with that when we open that up? Because then the next thing is, if we're bringing kids back, is it possible to use that facility? And the hard part with it is, as we use it, the cleaning of it. So we're working on right now trying to orchestrate methodically and strategically how to do one thing at a time to see what it's going to take, and then also implement in increments rather than trying to increment it all at once. So a long answer to yes, we are certainly going to try to get in there, but we're going to do it in a manner that we can adjust to it as we start making changes to what we're doing.
Thanks.
Yep.
Jeremy. Pete North just wanted me to have everyone realize that Jarvis was very thankful. Mohawk Department, DPW, and Public Works Department removed quite a bit of snow around the Jarvis School and also over to the bus garage. So they wanted to say thank you publicly and how much they really appreciated it. Also, Gordon was a big help in, you know, organizing that. So just a big shout out and thank you to them. So
I appreciate that. And what I would say, Gordy was talking to me yesterday and basically said how awesome both villages are with a lot of the asks sometimes that we have of them, and where they come in and step in and are very thoughtful and very cooperative with the relationships that we've been able to create both ways. And so thank you for that.
Jeremy, I've got a hypothetical here. As you read about like stimulus aid in different articles, now whether it comes through or not, I know is a whole other issue, but I know that part of it, the way they're proposing it anyway, is to look at ways to help children close the academic gap. I know that there's a million things going on right now, but are we at least discussing possible options for something like that if the money were to come through?
Yes and no. The conversation is this. Next year, we're going to have, and I kind of said this before, you know, there's going to have to be a lot of looking at where the gaps are for our kids. A lot of remediation is what we're anticipating, obviously. in some situations, not in all. I think that there's some sort of a perception too that all kids are going to be behind, and I just don't think that's the case. I mean, when I go down in the elementary buildings, some of the silver lining is that, you know, the smaller class sizes with the kids that have chosen to come in and the teachers that are able to work with them, they've been able to, in some cases, do more with them. In some cases, because of the social distance, it's unfortunate that they can't necessarily do the small groups the way they would want to do them, which would even be more tremendous for us if we were able to have that. Maybe that'll come with this 6 feet, 3 feet thing, or this other concept of if you can't be 6 feet, you can put up barriers, and maybe the barriers would allow us to have more small group instruction in that type of situation. But then we also know that at other levels, we're going to certainly have gaps. And so our conversation's been about that. It's more of a big, broad stroke of how are we going to close those gaps and offer opportunities to close those gaps going into next year. And I think that's the obvious conversation that all school districts are having when we see and find out where those gaps are. In terms of specifics, in terms of that money, not yet, because like you said and alluded to, what they say and what actually will happen with the money are two different things. And once we know for sure what that money is going to actually be coming our way, then we will get really strategic about how we can potentially use that.
Jeremy, I just want to say that's not extra money.
No.
They're looking at just replacing state aid with federal aid. So it's not going to be any additional money in our budget or our revenue streams. It'll just be basically they're going to take $2.5 million out of our state aid package and put it into our Title I package, which just creates a really huge issue in trying to plan for how we're going to show that federal aid being spent with all of the federal guidelines versus just general fund aid that we can spend anywhere we want. So it's actually, it restricts us more than it really helps us.
The other part to it too, Maggie, is they'll put ties to that money and say that we have to spend it a certain way, at which point, in order to get the money, you have to do A, B, or C with it. At that point, it's kind of like, man, in the past, we didn't have to do A, B, or C. We would just get that state aid. So that's going to be an issue as well in terms of how we have to justify what we're doing to get it now in terms of a certain percentage of the money that's going to come our way. So there's still a lot of little pieces to it that we will see. We'll wait and see to see how that money is going to come through, and then what hoops do we have to jump through in order to make sure that we get that money.
One thing we discussed at BOCES, and when Matt was discussing as far as the dugouts, different things like that, was how schools are going to be using your foundations to go to them to hopefully be able to do some of these smaller projects that we're unable to put into the building projects. So that's something also we can discuss in the future and bring up at some point.
One of the things I want to share is we had a presentation that was given to us 2 weeks ago as superintendents, where I kind of wasn't ready to have this conversation yet, but since you brought it up, I will, where there's a group that focuses on helping foundations, and they manage, let's say, the Central Valley Foundation that we have right now. And that's been somewhat of an issue sometimes with the monies and all of that. And they basically can help us to get funding within our foundations. They can help us run those scholarships and all of those things too. And then they also have donors that come in that if we list a bunch of projects that we want to complete, that donors will kind of just sign up for and say, yes, we will give $50,000 for that school to do A, B, and C. And sometimes it's anonymous and sometimes it's not, but it opens up more doorways. And so what I had asked at the time when the presentation was going on was, hey, can you come and give a presentation to the board as well as give a presentation to our current foundation so that we know the options of that. And so I've kind of been holding on to that information because we were working on obviously bringing kids back, and that was where a lot of time has been spent. But that's going to be something that I'd asked him to come to a board meeting and he said he would. And so he'll do a much better job than I did just now of explaining it. But I think there's great potential in him coming and in talking to the board as well as the Central Valley Foundation at this point. So that's going to happen.
Anything else for board discussion? All right, we're open. We're up to our public open forum. At this time, we would like to give the public an opportunity to comment about this agenda or about programs or operations within the school. Comments on personnel matters will not be addressed in public session. All comments will be noted and responded to by the Board of Education President or Superintendent at a later date. We ask that you keep comments to 10 minutes or less. Okay, all right. Before we move on to the next part of our agenda, Jeremy, I just have a point of inquiry. We have Matt who is joining us by phone. So a question I have is in terms of recording his vote, is that something that we can do if he's not on video?
Yes. Marcia, you're on, right?
Jason, I just got home, so I can switch to video.
Okay, outstanding.
That's
Even
even
better.
better.
Okay, yeah, there were those executive orders, Jeremy, where it spoke to those, but I was not sure if any of those had then lapsed and
Great.
reissued, so.
So they still are, those executive orders are still at play. If we would have been able to figure it out in a second here, how to do it, but now we don't have to, so that's better.
All right, even better. All right, are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda for individual consideration? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, letters A through E.
I'll make motion.
I'll
Travis?
second.
And Matt second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Motion carries. No old business, so we'll move on to new business. Need a motion to approve the second addendum to the employment contract of transportation supervisor.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Letter B, approval of arrangement of services, CSE, CPSE, and 504 accommodation plan meetings. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Maggie, and a second.
I'll second.
Travis? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Letter C. Trying to see if I missed anything on the new consent agenda here, or the new business. Letter C is the approval of combining contract for the 2020-21 season for boys bowling and girls bowling. I need a motion.
I'll make it.
Matt, and then Jonah.
Second. No, okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. And letter D, approval of NISBA Area 5 Director nomination. Need a motion?
I'll make it.
Travis, and then Jonah for a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And abstained? Motion carries. All right, please note our next meeting is March 17th. I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Maggie? I didn't hear anybody for a second.
I had
did.
Jane.
I'll take it.
Sorry.
Go with Jane for a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
guys. Thank you, everyone.
Keep it up.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.